Her life mattered. She lived with purpose. My sister was attacked and murdered in her home.
She unfriended Antonia Wilson the day before she died. This was a surprise attack. She did not know her attacker was coming that morning.
She only met him in public places. She would even meet him outside of friends' houses in parking lots. So it is very scary because Ms. Thomas did everything that you would, want to do.
This is the story of Fabiola Thomas, a 39-year-old woman whose life was tragically cut short after going on a couple of dates with a man she met on a dating app. Fabiola, known for her warmth and ambition, found herself as the object of obsession for Antonio Wilson, a man who could not accept her decision to end their connection. In June 2019, after pleading with Antonio to stop claiming her as his girlfriend and expressing her desire to move on and not continue to date Antonio, Fabiola was brutally murdered in her own apartment in Roswell, Georgia. Her roommate discovered her lifeless body in the bathtub, leading to a harrowing investigation that revealed the dark turn of events following her rejection. How could someone be so obsessed and take the life of someone that they only just met online? Welcome to Viral Crimes. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories. This story takes us to Roswell, Georgia, a peaceful suburb located just north of Atlanta. Fabiola Thomas, a resident of Roswell, was born July 8, 1979. She was a 39-year-old woman who had made a life for herself in Roswell. She worked diligently and was known for her kind and caring nature. Fabiola was a beloved sister, daughter, and friend. She was a woman of strong character, full of dreams and aspirations, with a bright future ahead of her. Described by those close to her as someone who lived with purpose. In the summer of 2019, seeking companionship, Fabiola decided to join a dating app. Unbeknownst to her, this decision would ultimately lead to a tragic and devastating turn in her life. While browsing the dating app, she met 38-year-old Antonio Wilson. The two chatted and dated briefly. Fabiola, ever cautious and mindful of her safety, kept their meetings in public places and ensured her friends knew where she was each time. Despite their short time together, Antonio quickly developed an obsessive attachment to Fabiola. His feelings escalated at an alarming pace, leading him to propose marriage after only a few dates. Fabiola, recognizing the intensity of his advances and feeling uncomfortable with the suddenness of his proposal, decided to end the relationship. She made it clear that she was not interested in continuing their connection, telling Antonio directly that she was not his woman and unfriended him on social media. Unable to accept Fabiola's rejection, Antonio's fixation turned dangerous. The intensity of his feelings and his refusal to let go culminated in a horrific act of violence that would end Fabiola's life far too soon. On the morning of June 8, 2019, in Roswell, Georgia, a horrific crime unfolded. The day started like any other for Fabiola Thomas as she prepared for work, likely thinking about her tasks for the day and the plans she had for the future. Little did she know that this ordinary morning would be her last. At approximately 7:30 a.m., neighbors reported seeing Fabiola outside near her car, going about her routine. But just over an hour later, at 8:40 a.m., her life was violently cut short. Antonio Wilson, a man she had briefly dated after meeting on the dating app Plenty of Fish, forced his way into her apartment. Consumed by rage and unable to accept Fabiola's rejection of his obsessive advances, Antonio committed an unspeakable act of violence. He strangled Fabiola in her own home, a place where she should have been safe, leaving her lifeless body in the bathtub. She was still in her pajamas, a haunting reminder of how suddenly and brutally her life was taken from her. The discovery of Fabiola's body was made by her roommate, who returned to the apartment and found a scene that would forever scar him. The male caller, described as frantic and hysterical, immediately contacted the police, reporting that something terrible had happened to his roommate. The Roswell Police Department responded swiftly, but it was already too late. Fabiola was pronounced dead at the scene, her life extinguished in a moment of unimaginable horror. As the investigation into Fabiola's murder began, details of her brief relationship with Antonio quickly came to light. They had met only a few weeks prior, during the summer of 2019. Their connection had not been deep or lasting, with Fabiola taking all the necessary precautions during their dates, meeting Antonio only in public places and informing her friends of her whereabouts. Despite a cautious approach, Antonio became fixated on Fabiola, his feelings escalating to a dangerous level. He proposed marriage after just a few dates, a move that Fabiola found unsettling. She immediately ended the relationship, sending Antonio a clear and direct message. "Keep your ring, I'm not your woman." Fabiola also took the step of unfriending Antonio on social media the day before her death, hoping to distance herself from his unwanted attention. But this rejection only fueled Antonio's obsession. Unable to accept that Fabiola did not want to be with him, he tracked down her address and plotted his attack. His actions on that fateful morning were premeditated, driven by a twisted need to exert control over a woman who had already made it clear that she did not want him in her life. Following the murder, the investigation continued, leading to Antonio's arrest on October 25, 2019. The police had gathered enough evidence to charge him with malice murder, a crime that would later be prosecuted as a case of domestic violence by the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. The case, however, did not move forward immediately. The legal proceedings were delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which slowed down many court cases across the country. It wasn't until 5 years after Fabiola's death that her family and friends would see justice served. On July 23, 2024, after a trial that included harrowing witness testimonies and explicit crime scene photographs, a Fulton County jury found Antonio Wilson guilty of murder. The jury's deliberation lasted a mere 30 minutes, reflecting the overwhelming evidence against him. Fulton Superior Court Judge Rochelle Carnesale sentenced Antonio to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars for his heinous crime.
While a Fulton County judge sentenced a man to life in prison after killing a woman he met on a dating app.
It's one of the hardest crimes to make sure that we combat.
And Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis says her office is proactively litigating domestic violence cases.
This is an issue that is really close to home for me.
Through the Brenda Byam Domestic Violence Unit, named after Willis's late aunt.
Ultimately stabbed her to death in the back.
Tuesday, part of the unit spoke to me after the defendant was sentenced in the 2019 murder of Fabiola Thomas.
This is a really sad case.
Her life mattered. She lived with purpose.
A Fulton County judge sentenced Antonio Wilson to serve life without the possibility of parole for malice murder.
She unfriended Antonio Wilson the day before she died.
Senior ADA Nalda Charles says text messages show Wilson couldn't handle Thomas's rejection towards him before strangling her inside of her Roswell apartment.
My sister was attacked and murdered in her home.
Investigators discovered Thomas and Wilson had only dated briefly after meeting on a dating app. Attorneys say after Thomas rejected his advances, he found where she lived and attacked her in her home.
This was a surprise attack. She did not know her attacker was coming that morning.
Jurors reached a guilty verdict in 30 minutes after seeing crime scene photos and hearing from Thomas's roommate, who found her body lying in a tub. And Wilson showed very little remorse during that sentencing. He declined speaking or giving any statements during Tuesday's hearing.
Throughout the trial, Senior Assistant District Attorney Nalda Charles and Assistant District Attorney Abigail Potter played key roles in prosecuting the case. They highlighted the senselessness of the crime, emphasizing that Fabiola had done everything right. She took precautions, communicated clearly, and tried to distance herself from a man who would not take no for an answer. Yet, despite all of her efforts, she became the victim of a brutal murder. Fabiola's family, particularly her brother Murdo Charles, expressed their grief and the deep sense of loss they felt. Murdo spoke of his sister's love for life, her dreams, and the goals she had yet to achieve, all of which were cruelly taken away from her in her final moments. The impact of her death on those who knew and loved her was profound, with many of her loved ones breaking down in tears during the sentencing, overwhelmed by the senselessness of the crime and the void left by her absence. The murder of Fabiola Thomas serves as a tragic reminder of the dangers that can arise from relationships, even brief ones, when one person's feelings turn into obsession. It is a sad reminder of how domestic violence can manifest, even in situations where the victim has tried to protect themselves. The swift and decisive verdict delivered by the jury brought some measure of justice to Fabiola's family, but nothing can erase the pain of losing her in such a brutal and unnecessary way. Antonio Wilson's conviction and life sentence ensures that he will never again have the opportunity to harm another woman. The tragedy that befell Fabiola Thomas is utterly unacceptable. She was merely seeking companionship through a dating app, an action that should never have led to the loss of her life. Fabiola had every right to end a relationship if she felt uncomfortable, and such a decision should not have culminated in her murder. No one can be compelled to stay in a relationship against their will. My condolences to her friends and family. May you continue to heal and one day find peace. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.